Elite teacher forces a simple student to solve calculus problem, unaware she's a mathematical genius. The chalkboard stood before her like a blank canvas of judgment. Huang Kim's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the small piece of chalk, acutely aware of the 100 pairs of eyes boring into her back. The prestigious lecture hall had fallen into a deafening silence. Mr. Donovan's challenging equation stretched across the board, a mathematical beast deliberately chosen to crush her spirit in front of everyone. This was supposed to be her moment of humiliation. This was supposed to be her breaking point. Have you ever stood frozen in terror as someone with authority deliberately tried to expose your perceived inadequacies in front of everyone who matters? That crushing pressure when you realize this moment could define how the world sees you forever. The most profound transformations often occur at our most vulnerable moments, when we're backed into corners with nowhere to hide. When the world expects us to crumble, but something within us refuses to break. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or where you come from? Perhaps judged by your quiet demeanor, modest clothing, or because English isn't your first language. The feeling cuts deep, knowing others have dismissed your potential before you've even had a chance to demonstrate it. Behind Huang's unassuming exterior and borrowed clothes from the thrift store hid a mind that saw mathematical patterns with extraordinary clarity. Yet in the competitive halls of Crestwood Academy, where designer uniforms and social connections often overshadow true intelligence, her brilliance remained invisible, especially to Mr. Donovan, whose legendary reputation was built on crushing students who dared challenge his authority. Today's story reveals how one quiet student turned her teacher's calculated attempt at revenge into her greatest triumph. In those paralyzing seconds at the chalkboard, with her future hanging in the balance, Huang made a decision that would change everything. Stay with me to discover how she not only proved her worth in that moment but transformed her entire future with one extraordinary display of courage and brilliance. Her journey from invisible outsider to celebrated prodigy hinged on this single, heart-stopping moment when she chose to let her mathematical genius speak for itself. If you've ever faced someone who tried to diminish your light or questioned your abilities, hit that like button and subscribe. This channel exists to share stories that reveal how life's most challenging moments can become catalysts for our greatest achievements. Let's witness how Huang's moment of potential public humiliation became the doorway to possibilities she never imagined possible. Long before facing that intimidating chalkboard, Huang Kim navigated a different kind of challenge each day, simply belonging. Her parents had arrived in America 14 years earlier with nothing but 2 suitcases, unwavering determination, and dreams of giving their daughter opportunities they never had. Their small apartment above the family-run convenience store became both workplace and home, where the scent of her mother's homemade kimchi mingled with the sound of her father's calculator clicking late into the night. Education is the one thing no one can take from you, her father would remind her while stocking shelves during pre-dawn hours. Those early mornings watching him meticulously arrange inventory, counting, measuring, calculating, planted the seeds of Huang's mathematical fascination. Numbers made sense when people often didn't. They followed reliable patterns, offered concrete solutions, and never judged her accent or second-hand clothes. At 13, when Huang scored in the top 0.1% on a nationwide mathematics examination, her parents scraped together every dollar they had saved to send her to Crestwood Academy, a prestigious school known for launching students into elite universities. They viewed the sacrifice as an investment in her future, but Huang quickly discovered that academic excellence alone wouldn't guarantee acceptance. Crestwood's hallways resembled fashion runways more than educational corridors. Students arrived in luxury vehicles, discussed summer homes in the Hamptons, and carried designer bags that cost more than 6 months of her family's rent. Meanwhile, Huang carefully maintained her 3 sets of uniform pieces purchased from the school's donation bin, praying no one would notice she wore the same clothes on rotation. Her natural instinct was to disappear. She learned to walk silently, choose seats near walls, speak only when directly addressed. This invisibility became both shield and prison, protecting her from unwanted attention while trapping her brilliance behind walls of insecurity. During lunch periods, while classmates gathered in boisterous social clusters, Huang would slip into empty classrooms to solve equations that challenged university students. Mathematics became her sanctuary. Within its elegant logic, she found freedom from the complicated social hierarchies that left her feeling perpetually inadequate. Complex polynomials and differential calculus welcomed her mind without questioning her background or bank account. In this realm, her creativity flourished in ways her teachers rarely witnessed because she seldom raised her hand in class. "Keep your head down, Huang," her mother would counsel during their weekly phone calls. "Let your actions speak louder than your words." This wisdom, passed through generations of women in her family who had faced discrimination and hardship, became Huang's mantra. Her mother had endured countless slights with dignified silence, choosing to prove her worth through relentless work rather than confrontation. But beneath Huang's quiet exterior raged a constant battle. Her mind raced with solutions and insights that begged for expression. Sometimes during lectures, she would solve problems 3 steps ahead of the teacher's explanation, identifying alternative approaches that were more elegant than textbook methods. Yet when opportunities arose to demonstrate her abilities, an invisible force seemed to glue her to her seat. This conflict intensified with each passing semester, her brilliant mind pulling her toward recognition while her survival instincts pushed her toward invisibility. Who was she to challenge established methods? What right did she have to stand out when her parents had sacrificed everything for her to simply have a seat in the classroom? The answers to these questions remained as complex as the mathematical riddles that occupied her thoughts during sleepless nights. Professor Edward Donovan wasn't just a teacher at Crestwood Academy, he was an institution. His reputation preceded him like a storm front, sending first-year students scurrying for cover when his tailored tweed jacket and perfectly polished Oxfords appeared at the end of a hallway. For 32 years, he had cultivated not just mathematical minds but a mythology around his methods that struck equal parts awe and dread in the student body. Donovan doesn't teach mathematics, he weaponizes it, upperclassmen would warn newcomers. He doesn't award grades, he passes judgment. These weren't exaggerations but accurate descriptions of a man who viewed his classroom as an intellectual coliseum where only the worthy survived. His classroom bore little resemblance to conventional learning environments. The standard inspirational posters and welcoming decorations that softened other spaces were absent from his sterile domain. Instead, framed photographs of mathematical luminaries lined the walls: Einstein, Ramanujan, Euler, their stern expressions seemingly evaluating each student's worthiness to occupy the same air as their theories. "Mathematics," Mr. Donovan often declared while pacing between desks, "is the language of absolute truth. There are no participation trophies in calculus. The equation is either solved correctly or it isn't." His voice carried the precision of a metronome, each syllable measured and cutting, designed to slice through excuses and hesitation. His approach created 2 distinct categories of students. The first, his protégés, were those who thrived under pressure, who could recite theorems without hesitation and execute solutions with machine-like efficiency. These chosen few received rare nods of approval, invitations to advanced seminars, and glowing recommendation letters that opened doors to Ivy League universities. The second category faced a different fate. Those who faltered under his cold stare, who offered tentative answers or, worst of all, attempted creative approaches that deviated from textbook methodology, became targets. Their papers returned bleeding with red ink, their attempts at classroom participation met with raised eyebrows and thinly veiled mockery. "Mr. Chen, if you'd spent half as much time studying as you did creating that unnecessarily complex solution, you might have arrived at the correct answer." Elegance in mathematics comes from efficiency, not artistic interpretation. Comments like these were common, delivered with such calculated precision that they lingered in students' minds long after class ended. Mr. Donovan's rigidity extended beyond teaching methods to a fundamental philosophy about mathematics itself. He viewed the discipline as a fixed hierarchy of established principles, each building upon the other in predetermined patterns. Creative approaches were, to him, diversions that reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of mathematical truth rather than innovative thinking. His grading system reflected this dogma. Points were deducted for solutions that didn't follow prescribed methods, even when they arrived at correct answers. "The journey matters as much as the destination," he would insist, though his definition of acceptable journeys was remarkably narrow. But what happens when brilliance doesn't follow the rules? When mathematical intuition speaks a dialect that textbooks never captured? When the mind racing fastest toward solutions travels along paths unmapped by conventional wisdom? This was the question Mr. Donovan had never been forced to answer, until Huang Kim quietly entered his classroom. Test return day at Crestwood Academy carried its own unique atmosphere, a potent blend of anticipation, dread, and resignation. Students gathered in nervous clusters outside Mr. Donovan's classroom, comparing study methods and predicted outcomes in hushed tones. Inside, the professor arranged the test papers in neat stacks, a judge preparing to deliver verdicts rather than academic feedback. Huang sat alone, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the grain patterns of her desk. She had spent 3 consecutive nights preparing for this exam, solving practice problems until her vision blurred and her fingers cramped around her pencil. Despite her quiet exterior, a cautious optimism flickered within her. She had understood the material deeply, approached each problem methodically, and verified her answers thoroughly. When Mr. Donovan placed her test paper face down on her desk with a slight curl of his lip, that fragile hope collapsed. She turned it over slowly, her eyes immediately drawn to the bold red number at the top, 71%. Below it, a single comment: unconventional approaches lead to unreliable results. The classroom blurred around her. 71% wasn't just disappointing, it was catastrophic for someone whose academic performance determined her scholarship status. One more grade like this would trigger a scholarship review. Huang tucked the paper into her folder without examining it further, unwilling to give her classmates the satisfaction of witnessing her distress. Later that afternoon, she claimed a secluded corner desk in the library's mathematics section, hidden behind tall shelves of calculus references. Methodically, she laid out her test beside her notes and textbook. Problem by problem, solution by solution, she reconstructed her work, checking each step against established methods. 2 hours later, her suspicions had crystallized into certainty. On 4 separate problems, collectively worth 18 percentage points, her solutions were mathematically sound but approached from angles not covered in Donovan's lectures. She had derived correct answers through alternate methods, yet he had marked them wrong without explanation beyond brief notations like incorrect approach or not as demonstrated. The realization struck her with unexpected force: this wasn't about mathematical accuracy but about compliance. The knot in her stomach transformed from shame to indignation. For the first time since arriving at Crestwood, Huang felt something stronger than her fear of standing out, a burning sense of injustice. "Keep your head down," her mother's voice whispered in her mind. The advice had served her family for generations as they navigated systems built to exclude them. But another voice rose in opposition: her father's quiet determination when a supplier tried to overcharge him. Respect is earned through integrity, not submission. That evening, Huang paced outside the staff room, her test clutched in trembling hands. Twice she turned to leave, courage failing. On the 3rd attempt, she pushed the door open before she could change her mind. Mr. Donovan sat among colleagues, teacup poised halfway to his lips as she approached. His expression shifted from surprise to mild irritation at the interruption. "Mr. Donovan," she began, her voice barely audible. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I'd like to discuss my test grade, please." The professor's eyebrows raised a fraction. "Miss Kim, is it? I'm rather occupied at present. I believe there's been a grading error." The words emerged stronger than she anticipated. "On several problems, I used valid mathematical approaches that arrived at the correct solutions, yet they were marked incorrect." Mr. Donovan's face hardened. "I grade based on demonstrated methods, Miss Kim. Creative interpretations aren't appropriate for foundational calculus. With respect, sir, mathematics allows for multiple valid approaches to the same solution. I can show you the proof supporting my methods." Their exchange drew attention from nearby faculty, particularly Miss Harper, the statistics professor known for her methodical fairness. She approached with casual interest that quickly transformed into professional curiosity as she examined the disputed problems. These solutions are actually quite elegant, Ms. Harper observed, pointing to Huang's alternative derivation. Different from the textbook approach, certainly, but mathematically sound, possibly more efficient in application. Mr. Donovan's complexion reddened as Ms. Harper continued her assessment. What began as a private disagreement had become a public challenge to his authority. After several tense minutes of mathematical debate, he conceded with visible reluctance. Fine. I'll adjust the grade to reflect technical accuracy rather than methodological adherence. He amended the score to 89% with a sharp stroke of his pen, his eyes conveying a clear message: this defiance would not be forgotten. Have you ever gathered every ounce of courage to challenge someone in a position of power when you knew you were right? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes standing up for yourself can be the hardest math of all. Victory tasted bittersweet for Huang as she tucked the amended test paper into her folder. The corrected 89% would protect her scholarship, but the cold calculation in Mr. Donovan's eyes haunted her exit from the staff room. She had won the battle but sensed a broader conflict had just begun. For someone who had spent years blending into walls and avoiding attention, becoming the subject of a professor's focused displeasure was terrifying new territory. In the days that followed, subtle changes permeated Mr. Donovan's classroom. His gaze lingered on Huang's desk during difficult questions, waiting for her to falter. When she correctly answered queries directed at her, his acknowledgments came clipped and formal. When she remained silent, his smile carried satisfaction. The message was clear: her challenge had been noted, categorized, and filed away, not forgotten. He treats even simple equations like declarations of war now, whispered May, the only classmate who occasionally spoke to Huang. Whatever you did, he's not letting it go. 2 weeks after the grade confrontation, Mr. Donovan made an announcement that caused excited murmurs throughout the mathematics department. Crestwood would host a special lecture on advanced calculus applications, open to students and faculty from neighboring universities. Academic journals would send representatives. The mathematics community's most respected figures would attend. This will showcase Crestwood's commitment to mathematical excellence, Mr. Donovan explained, his voice carrying practiced warmth that didn't reach his eyes. I'll be presenting some rather challenging concepts. Attendance is voluntary but highly encouraged for serious mathematics students. His gaze swept the classroom before settling momentarily on Huang. Something in that glance, a fleeting calculation, a subtle anticipation, triggered warning signals in her mind. Her instincts, honed by years of navigating social landscapes as an outsider, detected purpose behind his casual invitation. Despite her misgivings, Huang knew attendance was mandatory in every way that mattered. Absenteeing herself would signal defeat, validating any whispers that her grade challenge had been mere luck rather than mathematical understanding. When the lecture day arrived, Crestwood's largest hall transformed into an academic showcase. University professors in formal attire mingled with published mathematicians and educational board members. Photographers captured handshakes between Crestwood's headmaster and visiting dignitaries. The atmosphere hummed with intellectual energy and institutional pride. Huang slipped into a middle-row seat, hoping to maintain her practiced invisibility among the crowd of mathematical luminaries. She watched Mr. Donovan work the room, shaking hands and accepting compliments with practiced humility. In this environment, surrounded by admirers and equals, he appeared even more formidable, a king holding court rather than merely a classroom teacher. When he took the podium, the hall fell respectfully silent. His presentation began with elegant simplicity before building into increasingly complex mathematical territory. His confidence never wavered as he navigated through differential equations and integral applications that left many audience members furrowing their brows in concentration. Midway through the lecture, Mr. Donovan paused dramatically. Theory is valuable, he announced, but application reveals true understanding. He displayed a particularly complex equation on the projection screen, one involving multiple variables and requiring sophisticated manipulation techniques. His eyes scanned the audience deliberately before stopping at Huang's row. "Miss Kim," he called, his voice projecting perfect professional courtesy. Perhaps you demonstrate your approach to this problem for our distinguished guests. But sometimes, revenge doesn't go as planned. Miss Kim, Mr. Donovan repeated, his voice carrying a note of challenge that rippled through the auditorium. This equation represents a particularly interesting application of the principles we've been discussing. Would you care to demonstrate a solution approach for our guests? The room's collective gaze shifted toward Huang. Distinguished mathematicians, curious students, and faculty members all turned in unison, searching for the student singled out by the presenter. Huang felt her heart slam against her ribcage as blood rushed to her face. This wasn't a casual invitation, it was a carefully orchestrated moment designed to place her mathematical abilities under the harshest spotlight possible. The equation glowing on the projection screen wasn't merely difficult, it was deliberately complex, a multivariable calculus problem requiring techniques typically reserved for graduate-level mathematics. Mr. Donovan had constructed not just a problem but a trap, baited with her recent defiance and set to snap closed on her academic reputation. Time seemed to compress around Huang as her options crystallized: decline and confirm his low expectations, or accept and risk catastrophic failure before the exact audience whose respect would shape her academic future. Her lungs constricted as panic threatened to overwhelm her rational thought. The weight of hundreds of eyes pressed down on her shoulders, waiting for her response. In that suspended moment between challenge and decision, her mother's voice floated through her consciousness: let your actions speak louder than your words. The simple wisdom carried across oceans and generations, a reminder that her family had faced impossible odds before and found strength in the facing. Huang stood slowly, her chair scraping against the auditorium floor in the heavy silence. Each step toward the stage felt like wading through concrete, her legs wooden and unwilling. The distance between her seat and the whiteboard stretched impossibly long, a gauntlet of judgment she forced herself to walk one step at a time. Mr. Donovan handed her a marker with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Take your time, he said, the false generosity transparent to everyone present. Huang turned toward the board, the blank white surface both intimidating and liberating. She raised her hand, hesitated for a breath, then made her first mark, a single variable transformation that would allow her to approach the problem from an unexpected angle. Something shifted within her as the marker moved across the board. The paralyzing self-consciousness that had defined her Crestwood experience began melting away, replaced by the pure, focused clarity that mathematics had always given her in private moments. Here, in the language of symbols and relationships, she was suddenly, completely free. Her hand moved with increasing confidence, defining parameters, establishing boundaries, creating a framework uniquely suited to the problem. Rather than following conventional solution paths, she restructured the equation itself, revealing symmetries and patterns invisible through traditional approaches. The auditorium's atmosphere transformed gradually. The initial pitying discomfort gave way to curiosity, then focused attention, and finally, unmistakable appreciation. Whispers passed between university professors. A mathematics journal editor leaned forward in her seat. Even students who had never spoken to Huang watched with newfound respect as she navigated mathematical territory few of them could comprehend. Note how this transformation creates a direct pathway between these seemingly unrelated variables, Huang explained, her voice growing stronger with each accurate step. By viewing the relationship through cylindrical coordinates rather than Cartesian, we can identify this elegant correlation. She worked through the problem with precision and insight, her approach revealing not just computational skill but deep mathematical intuition. When she applied her final calculation and circled the solution, the marker squeaked against the board with decisive finality. Huang turned to face the audience, marker still clutched in her hand. For the first time, she truly saw the expressions directed at her, not dismissal or pity, but genuine astonishment. Complete silence filled the hall as minds processed what they had just witnessed. Then, from the back row, a single pair of hands began to clap. Dr. Malik, director of the International Mathematical Scholarship Foundation, had risen to his feet, his expression alight with discovery. His applause broke the spell of silence, triggering a cascade of recognition that swept through the auditorium like a wave. The standing ovation built from scattered appreciation to thunderous acclaim. Faculty members exchanged amazed glances. Students who had never acknowledged Huang's existence now watched her with newfound respect. Mathematical journals representatives scribbled furious notes about the unknown student with breakthrough approaches. At the podium, Mr. Donovan stood frozen, his carefully constructed humiliation transformed into an unintended coronation. His expression cycled through disbelief, confusion, and the dawning realization that his attempt to diminish Huang had instead elevated her beyond his reach. The trap he had set for a quiet immigrant student had instead caught him, exposing not her inadequacy but his own limited vision of what mathematical brilliance could look like. As the applause finally subsided, Dr. Malik made his way through the crowd toward Huang, who stood uncertain at the front of the hall, and used to being the center of such positive attention. "Miss Kim," he said, extending his hand, "I've been evaluating mathematical talent for over 30 years, and what I just witnessed was extraordinary. Your approach demonstrates not just technical proficiency but the kind of creative thinking that advances our field." He presented her with his business card, embossed with the prestigious International Mathematical Scholarship Foundation logo. "We would be honored to offer you a full scholarship to our advanced program. Your talent deserves proper nurturing." Huang stared at the card, its significance slowly registering. This wasn't just academic recognition but financial liberation, the possibility of continuing her education without the crushing burden her parents had shouldered. The weight of years, of hiding her abilities, of doubting her worth, of believing her voice didn't deserve to be heard, suddenly lifted from her shoulders. Tears welled in her eyes, not from the familiar sting of exclusion but from profound validation that her mathematical voice mattered. From his position at the podium, Mr. Donovan observed this exchange with a complex mixture of emotions playing across his features. The public validation of Huang's abilities forced an uncomfortable reassessment of his teaching philosophy. The mathematical beauty he had just witnessed couldn't be dismissed or diminished, it demanded acknowledgement. His attempt to prove his superiority had instead revealed the narrowness of his perspective and the limitations of his approach. In the weeks that followed, Crestwood Academy experienced subtle but meaningful shifts. Huang, no longer burdened by invisibility, began to speak up in classes, her confidence growing with each contribution. Other students with unconventional approaches felt emboldened to share their insights. More surprisingly, Mr. Donovan's teaching methods gradually evolved. While still demanding excellence, he showed newfound openness to alternate solution paths and creative approaches. "Mathematics isn't just about finding the right answer," he remarked during a lecture, "but about discovering new pathways to truth." Few students recognized this philosophical shift for what it was, an admission that truth could arrive through multiple routes. Perhaps most meaningful was Huang's transformation into a mentor for other students who felt marginalized. She established a weekly study group specifically for those who approached problems from unexpected angles, creating space for mathematical creativity that traditional classrooms often constrained. "Your different perspective isn't a weakness to overcome," she would tell struggling students. "It's a strength waiting to be recognized." The incident became part of Crestwood's unofficial history, a reminder that brilliance often hides in plain sight, waiting for the courage to emerge. For the faculty, it prompted deeper consideration of how they evaluated student potential and what signals of excellence they might be overlooking in their classrooms. For Huang, the moment at the whiteboard became a dividing line between who she had been and who she could become, proof that sometimes standing in your truth, however terrifying, opens doors you never imagined possible. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their unique approach to problems might be their greatest strength. Sometimes our most powerful abilities hide within the very differences others dismiss. So I ask you again, what would you do if someone with authority deliberately tried to humiliate you in front of everyone who matters? Would you shrink away, accepting their judgment as the final word on your worth? Or would you find the courage to show them, and yourself, what you're truly capable of? Huang's journey reminds us that our defining moments rarely arrive when we're prepared for them. They appear unexpectedly, disguised as impossible challenges, public scrutiny, or deliberate attempts to diminish us. These crucibles of character don't just test us, they reveal us, stripping away pretense until only essential truth remains. For Huang, standing at that whiteboard wasn't merely about solving an equation. It was about answering a fundamental question that echoes through all our lives: will you allow others' perception of your limitations to become your reality? Or will you dare to demonstrate capabilities that even you might not fully recognize in yourself? The most profound growth often occurs precisely when we feel least equipped to handle the challenges before us. Huang didn't transform from hesitant student to mathematical prodigy in that lecture hall. She simply allowed her true abilities to emerge from beneath the protective layers of invisibility she had built around herself. The genius was always there, waiting for permission to express itself fully. Notice how brilliance rarely announces itself with confidence and fanfare. Instead, it exists quietly in overlooked corners, in unconventional thinking, in approaches that don't fit neatly into established patterns. How many innovations, breakthroughs, and solutions remain undiscovered because we've trained ourselves to recognize excellence only when it follows familiar paths? Perhaps most importantly, Huang's story demonstrates the extraordinary power of believing in yourself when no one else does, or when the few who might believe in you aren't in positions of influence or authority. That internal compass, that quiet certainty that your understanding is valid even when it contradicts established wisdom, isn't arrogance. It's the essential foundation of every meaningful contribution throughout human history. Mr. Donovan's miscalculation wasn't in challenging Huang but in assuming her difference indicated deficiency rather than unique perspective. His eventual growth came from recognizing that excellence wears many faces and speaks in many voices, sometimes in accents and approaches that our limited experience hasn't prepared us to recognize. For each of us, there will be whiteboards of judgment where we must decide whether to retreat or advance, whether to accept external assessments of our value or demonstrate our authentic capabilities. Those moments don't just change our circumstances, they fundamentally reshape how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. What whiteboard are you standing before today? What challenge seems designed to expose your inadequacy but might instead reveal your unique brilliance? How might your greatest strengths be hiding within the very differences others have taught you to minimize or conceal? Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to ensure you never miss another story that might transform how you see your own potential. Because sometimes, the most powerful inspiration comes from recognizing that the brilliance we admire in others might be quietly waiting within ourselves, needing only the courage to emerge.